Welcome to Self-Publishing News with Ally News Editor Dan Holloway. I'm Howard Lovey, and together we will bring you the latest in indie publishing news and commentary. Self-Publishing News is brought to you by the Alliance of Independent Authors. Hello and welcome to the July 2021 edition of Self-Publishing News from the Alliance of Independent Authors. I'm Howard Lovey in Traverse City, Michigan, and joining me from Oxford University is Ally News Editor Dan Holloway. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Hi, Howard. Very good at the moment. Quite hot still. We've had a period of long, sustained hot weather, but I guess you've had it.
Oh,
you've had it even more so over there.
We've had it more so, but I'm up here in at the 45th parallel, exactly halfway between the equator and the North Pole, and we get fairly mild summers. So far, no complaints. And speaking of summer, this will be our last episode until September. We're going to take the month of August off, and I was planning to go on vacation, maybe take the family to New York City, but the Delta variant might have other plans for me, so it looks like it might be a staycation. And I know you're always working, so no vacation for you.
I'll be doing lots of running. That's about it.
That's right.
Same as usual.
All right, well, let's start talking about the news. And we want to talk about a concept that we've been discussing at Ally for a long time, and that's called going wide. And I'll use myself as an example. As you may know, that there are three parts to my career. There are the podcasts I host and produce for Ally. I'm also a book editor. And when I'm not doing those things, I'm a journalist who specializes in Jewish issues, and I'm also working on a Jewish-themed memoir. I use Twitter to heavily promote my Jewish work, but I've reached almost a critical mass where I want to launch a newsletter, hopefully a paid one, to promote my work in this area. So I signed up for Review, which is Twitter's email newsletter platform, and Substack, and I compared the two, and Substack seems to be better, offering more features, including embedding podcasts, which is what I want to do. So that's me, and it's part of what we are calling in the indie publishing business going wide. So, Dan, let's talk about going wide and some of the options available to indie authors. First, sort of at the 40,000 foot level, what do we mean when we say going wide?
Without being too controversial, going wide is normally simply used to refer to not just being on Amazon, but also at a more sort of granular level, at just doing as many different things as possible and making the most of as many parts of your audience as you can, and finding as many different audiences through as many media as possible, as many platforms as possible, as many formats as possible. Right,
and that means, especially as indie authors, we don't just write the book and sit back and watch the money come in. We have to work for it, and that means social media. It could mean an email newsletter, it could mean a blog, it could mean a podcast, or all of the above. Right now, email newsletters seem to be really, really popular. So maybe we can talk about those a little bit and what's new in the email newsletter world.
We talked a little bit last time about Substack, and obviously you've since dipped your toe in the water. That seems to be. I'm still undecided whether to sign up for Substack or Medium. I think we had that conversation too, and I'm not 100% sure what how something like Substack. We talked about the difference between fiction and non-fiction, I think.
Right.
And how a lot of newsletters seem to be built for non-fiction authors, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't opportunities for fiction authors to do something imaginative with them.
Right, yeah. It's easier for me writing non-fiction because there's always something new in the news to talk about.
Yes, and you are a journalist as well, so it's almost like it's sort of like Reader's Digest, isn't it? Or like something. Is Reader's Digest even a thing anymore? I'm showing my age, possibly.
I haven't seen them in doctors' offices lately, but I'm not even sure. We'll have our team of fact checkers check that out.
I used to be absolutely addicted to Reader's Digest when I was sort of 6 or 7. One of the first non-fiction, I guess, things that fascinated me was the story of Georgy Markov. If you remember the guy who was he was a spy who was killed by ricin in the a pellet in the end of an umbrella on a bridge in London.
Oh, okay, right.
At the
Okay.
sort of very early bit of the 80s, and I remember reading this in Reader's Digest, and it absolutely fascinated me. So I think it was it was a proper long form essay, and I think that's what subscription newsletters give you the chance to do, is these really high quality long form commentaries and essays.
Right. Even though Reader's Digest, it's almost it's part of the language. If you say the Reader's Digest version, it means abridged, or the short form. But newsletters could be it could be anything. It could be a shortened version of something you've written that's out there in the world, and you want people to read it. It could be a standalone product on its own. A little bit of both. The way I picture it is, it'll link to some of my work, but also feature some original material, and hopefully, maybe some people will want to pay for it, and that's I guess another discussion to have. Sort of like a drug dealer. The first one's free, but when do you start charging?
Yeah, and that sort of brings us on to the social media aspect of it, which is the stuff that's been in the news the last couple of weeks, because social media is much more. There's this expectation that it's free, but a lot of social media channels are now starting to offer people ways of monetizing them. Right,
which I think is a great trend. Every tweet I write, I think I'm giving this away. Nobody's paying me a damn thing for this, and so tell me more about what's new with that.
Well, it started off. There are a couple of things. Twitter obviously has been tinkering with this idea of super followers for a little while, where you can pay the people you really love following for access to their exclusive content. The latest people to enter the fray are Tumblr. And I know we were having a conversation before we started where we said we didn't realize that Tumblr was still a thing. Apparently it is.
Right. They were very popular among the younger people, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and I thought they disappeared.
Yes, it was the home of alt-lit, which was one of sort of the first big trends in internet literature. And so almost preceded Instapoets as being people who did really well out of finding an audience and then finding ways to make money out of an audience on the internet. And yes, I thought it had, by and large, disappeared and gone. I thought it had gone the way of LiveJournal, which was to be taken over by a Russian server, which meant that no one wanted to post content there anymore.
Right.
But clearly not. It's clearly still going.
So what are they doing to monetize content?
They have introduced something that they're calling Posts Plus, which enables you to charge anything from $3.99 to $9.99 per month for people to subscribe to special content. So again, it's this idea, like you were saying, it's almost freemium, that your main timeline would still be displayed to everyone, but you could put some posts behind a paywall. And people would have to pay to unlock them. I guess I agree. It offers, as writers who are expected to use social media, some of us actually find that we're better at social media than writing in other formats, and that's actually our particular niche. And it's great to have a way to make money from that. I would see it as going wide in a much larger sense of not all indie authors are indie authors of books.
I see.
And some of us are journalists. Some people write articles. Some people write short stories. Some might actually. Some are poets, and some might find their natural home writing really high quality content for Tumblr. So this is a way to create almost an alternative fan base.
So that's Tumblr. Are there any other services for monetizing content?
Well, it's not monetizing, but another interesting thing that Twitter have introduced this month is something called Twitter Facets. That's facets as in like you get on diamonds. And this is a feature that enables you to write from the same overall account. It enables you to write for different audiences. So it's the equivalent of writing under different pseudonyms, I guess. So you wear many hats in your writing. I wear many hats in my writing, so I write thrillers, I write non-fiction, I write poetry, I write literary fiction, and the readers of each of those don't necessarily want to hear about the other stuff. And what Twitter Facets does is it enables you to target certain tweets at certain audiences without the hassle of having to create different accounts for them. So at the moment,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, what we have to do is we have to create a different account for every. Almost some people do it every time they have a new book out.
Right.
But this is a way of essentially saying this is one pseudonym, this is another pseudonym, this is another one. This is each of our different areas of writing. We can manage them all, not upset our audiences, but do it all from the same account.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. I wear different hats. So on my Twitter feed, I promote, I try to be provocative in my tweets about Jewish issues, but then I also, tweet about book editing, and I put in, writing tips, and then I promote these podcasts, and they are often not the same audience, and I'll lose followers if I tweet something too controversial for the political side. So that's a good solution for somebody like me who tends to sometimes be a little too provocative and lose some readers.
Yeah, I think it sounds really promising. So it's in beta currently, but I hope it's one of the things that makes it out and into the wider.
So there are still some authors, I think, out there who, maybe a few of them who are still skeptical about social media or going wide in social media. I noticed this when I interview authors for my Inspirational Indie Authors podcast. I check their Twitter to see if they're there, and often they're there, but they haven't updated it in months, and they have 3 followers. So obviously, it's not a priority for them. How can we convince authors that this kind of thing is worth it? I'm not saying Twitter, specifically, but maybe there's something else. What can we say to authors who are skeptical as to whether they should be spending their time doing this at all?
It's a difficult question because in a way I see the specialism and not spreading yourself too thin is really important. On the other hand, finding the things that you turn out to be really good at and where your audience hangs out is also important. So I think some of the time authors think they know where their audiences are or in particular know where they aren't and might be missing out on things. And I mean, it's true of social media. It's also true, talking of going wide, of overseas markets, for example. So one of the things I've been talking about this week is the difference between Storytel and Scribd as different platforms for subscription, and the fact that Storytel offers markets in many different countries and many different languages. And I think one of the things that I know this is something Orna talks about a lot, that we often miss out on is the opportunity to remember that we can sell to people in languages that aren't our first language, by getting our work translated and then by finding the right platform to sell in each individual market. So I think, yes, it's important to specialize, but it's also important to realize that we might be missing out on there are all sorts of people who might want to read our work. So I tend to be a fan of giving things a try and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I recently discovered, I checked my Instagram for the first time in, I don't know, maybe a year or so, and I discovered that a lot of people who know me from Twitter are trying to connect with me on Instagram, and I have nothing but old family photos on there. So now I'm wondering, should I be on Instagram? And if I did, what kind of time commitment would that involve? And so you have to, that's sort of, what I have to weigh.
Yeah, I think that the time commitment is really important, which is why most people tend to focus on one or two things. And obviously, if you're writing new content for a platform, then that's slightly different from trying to market the same content on different platforms, which is what you can do by trying to find overseas markets sometimes.
Okay. Well, any last words on the subject of going wide and email newsletters? Any last bit of advice?
I would say, I mean, as I say, I'm a fan of trying it and seeing, but I think if you want to save time on that, find authors who are writing the same stuff as you are,
Right.
and finding what works for them. So I'll be keeping an eye on what happens with your Substack.
Yeah. No, and for that, I've been subscribing to other journalists who have similar audiences and seeing what works for them and what doesn't.
Because things like Substack and Medium are quite new, a lot of people are quite open and transparent about how much they are or aren't earning out of it. So you can pick up quite a lot of useful information that way. In a way that sometimes some authors are quite cagey about their earnings, you'll find quite a lot of transparency on things like this. So that can be a really helpful way of looking at what's actually working for people.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, you hear anecdotally people making six figures off of their Substack, but I think we're talking about a very small elite. What about the rest of us slobs who aren't celebrities yet? And speaking of celebrities, okay, here's a segue. We talked last time about Jeff Bezos being sent to outer space, or sending himself to outer space on a very, I don't know if we have a family audience or not, but a very phallic-looking, let's say a phallic-looking rocket ship. And I'm sure, some people would have liked Jeff Bezos to have stayed in outer space, but I think both you and I are technology enthusiasts, and I say even if it's a billionaire who people have differing opinions on, I say, this brings technology forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of his spaceship, that's for sure. It was,
Yeah.
But it was, yes, it's been very interesting. I didn't realize it was going to fly so quickly, because it was last month we were just reporting on the sale of the ticket, and then he was off this month. I grew up with Carl Sagan's Cosmos and with the launch of the space shuttle, and I really like space, and I sort of see the value in space and space travel from all sorts of perspectives, and I think the one thing that a lot of people don't do is I think there's a lack of ambition and a lack of dreaming and a lack of setting sights high, and
Right.
I think that going to space is a really good way, even if people don't want to go into space, of reminding people that even if you think what he's doing is a really bad thing, reminding people that there are really big challenges that need tackling. It might not be going to space, but I think we can often lose sight of the really big challenges because they seem overwhelming, and sometimes someone taking something like that on is a reminder that big challenges can be as solvable as small ones if you start taking them on.
Wonderful.
That's a really political. That's a politically non-committal way of talking about it.
Well, everybody always says, the space race brought other technologies, into high gear. For everything from, the cliche is, well, that's how we got soft drinks, like Tang, but also, we're talking about, a lot of other subcontractors that came up with some really innovative stuff based on their space research. In this case, we all contributed to sending Jeff Bezos into space because we all bought from Amazon at one time or another.
Right.
So what is he gonna give back to us? We'll see. So.
Yeah, that's a much bigger question.
Right. And that's a story for another day, we'll say.
Right.
Okay, Dan. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you as always, and have a wonderful August.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you again in September.
Super. Speak then.
Bye. You've been listening to Self-Publishing News with Dan Holloway. I'm Howard Lovey. Our weekly self-publishing advice broadcast is brought to you by Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors. If you enjoy this show, please tap on your favorite podcast app and give us a review. This will help others discover the family of Ally podcasts. Find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at alliance.ally.org. independentauthors.org.